Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. How are you all today? So my name is Marie Mohara, and I'm here with my colleagues Emma Fenton and Aisling Murray, and we are going to go through how to master online interviews. Now, just bear with me. So I am a senior construction and engineering recruiter here with FRS, and I am joined by Emma and Aisling, and we all work with FRS Recruitment, which is a part of the FRS network. We are a cooperative recruitment organisation that was established in 1980. We cover commercial, pharmaceutical, manufacturing, technical engineering, IT, healthcare, commercial, and also temping requirements also. So here today is Emma Fenton.
Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar. I'm a doctors and healthcare recruiter. I work a global market, so online interviews are something that happens for me every single day. Looking forward to giving you my top tips.
And also here today is Aisling Murray.
Hi, thanks very much for joining us today. My name is Aisling Murray. I work out of the Cavan branch of FRS Recruitment. I'm part of the National Technical Engineering and Manufacturing Recruitment team. And unlike Emma, we're probably seeing a swift move with our clients into online technology platforms. So I'm here today to give you additional experience in terms of what we're seeing happening so far.
Perfect. And today we are going to go through some of the various technologies, how to basically master this online interview. So we have live and one way, and with some of our live technologies, Aisling is going to go through them.
So basically everybody's familiar with these terms from now on. They're becoming part of the norm. And we've got Zoom, Skype, WhatsApp, Microsoft Teams. What we would say and recommend to any candidates that are entering into a recruitment process using these tools is to install, practice, and understand how the technology works. That's an absolute must and a given. With Zoom, you'll be sent an ID and a login. Skype, you will have to exchange user profile information with the client that's organizing an interview. Just on that note, well, it springs to mind, just remember to use a professional Skype identification. You know, you don't want to have anything on your Skype ID like Easter Bunny 123 and a silly funny picture. It's probably not the best impression that you want to give. So you have to look at every step of the interaction with these technologies. WhatsApp probably gives you the most freedom in terms of technology that's used for interviews at the moment. It's mobile, you can use it anywhere as well. So Miriam, you've got some insights there on some of the one-way systems.
Yeah, so with the one-way technology, it's quite different to live. What happens is that you are basically given a set list of questions within a set period of time, and you have to answer them. Now, the only way you can really do this is practice. So one of the more popular ones in Ireland would be Sonru. It's used by both Irish and multinational organisations, but Sparkwire and HireView are the same. You're basically given an instruction manual when you are given your interview details, and then you have to go through them bit by bit. They're quite easy, but you really have to practice because it is an artificial environment for us all to sit down and to have to record. You know, like some tech companies, all right, are even pushing towards, say, the likes of, you know, video CVs and whatnot. But this is, you have to get your best answers out as quick as possible. And following on from that, Emma is going to go through preparing for an online interview.
Yeah, I suppose from my point of view, and I think for most professional recruiters will tell you that the top tip for online interviews is to practice and prepare. So practice, prepare. Make sure, okay, starting off with your location, make sure it's professional, neutral. So like if you have a home office, ideal. If you don't, have a neutral background somewhere, something that looks quite professional. You know, don't bring interviewers into your messy bedroom or kitchen. Then prepare your technology. do an internet speed test. Make sure your connection is capable of maintaining a video interview. There may be more than 2 or 3 interviewers. That's 4 or 5 different live streams you're running. You will need a pretty good internet connection for that. Install the app well in advance that you're going to be using for your video interviewing, and practice using it. Even if you have to ring your husband in the next room and do multiple practices with them or family members. If you're going through a recruitment agency like FRS, we'll happily do some practice runs with you on an app. Make sure that your device is charged up. Really important one. Last thing you want is the interview drags on and you're getting a warning notification that your laptop or iPad's about to die. Turn off alerts and pop-ups. No distractions at all. So literally lock yourself into a room if you need to. Make sure there's no interruptions scheduled. Defer that online shopping that's coming. Put your phone on silent. Close all your other apps and pop-ups and chats and everything else that you have normally running that you wouldn't think twice about. Just make sure there's no distractions. You should be as singular as if you were in a company doing an interview. Your outfit then, prepare your outfit and try it on and trial it on video. Take a selfie and see what it looks like. Take an online video and see what it looks like. There are certain outfits that come across really strange. White can make you look, white can come across as really bright and distracting. Similarly, people have had bad experiences with certain shades of green, and patterns can become kind of weird and start moving on the screen. So basically, make sure your outfit is video compatible. So maybe do a trial run with that. I've said it already and I'll say it again, do several test runs in your full outfit. Do video calling or interviewing preps multiple times if you can. Did any of you guys want to add anything to that? Did I miss anything?
I guess I know you've covered off a lot of the information there. It's really about, I think, eliminating any distractions. Normally, when you go into a face-to-face interview, you're very much engaged in a very specific setting. But when you're doing your interviews at home, there can be so many distractions there, and you need to kind of work out what's going to be best for you in terms of creating a peaceful space, an area where you can concentrate, where your mind is clear and you can apply yourself directly and thoroughly to addressing any questions that are going to come up in the interview. And for everybody, that's going to be a little bit different as well. So just close all your programs, make sure your phones are off. These are all basics. No distractions whatsoever. Make sure your desk is clear. But also what you can do in terms of preparation for online interviews as well is have some pop-up notes that you can have prepared, which you can't actually utilize in an interview as such as well, but you can have some tools around you that you need to bring in. And I suppose a very basic thing that we need to think of as well is you may potentially be sitting there with the interviewees for up to an hour. Make sure you've got some water beside you. Normally the interview panel will give you water or some refreshments, so just make sure you have something there if you start to get dry.
Okay. Miriam.
Yeah, and just one thing, even from we were doing practice runs, is make sure your actual device is up to date, because when we were going through this earlier, mine decided to restart itself. So definitely make sure all of your updates are done. You have everything downloaded and it is literally perfect by the time you come around to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely the most important thing, because sometimes you might have your notifications muted, but there's more important things that will be going on in the background as far as updates and things. So definitely make sure that they're all ready to go. Yeah. Perfect. And next we're going to move on to what to expect within the interview itself with Aisling.
So in terms of what to expect in an online interview, I guess my approach and advice to people is that the same principles will apply for an online interview as will apply for a normal face-to-face interview. Any recruiter that is working with a candidate to prepare them for an interview, the first thing that they will say to them is prepare, 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 practice. Practice does make perfect, and you can see that in candidates where they've gone into interviews and haven't prepared maybe on the first round or on the first interview process. They make interview again for second round and they've done a lot more preparation, and it really, really stands to them in terms of their confidence and ability to address the questions. The principles are still the same. You need to know your CV inside out. I know that sounds basic, but every role that you have, every duty and responsibility, your reporting mechanisms, who you dealt with, and be ready to answer around some of the achievements that you've made, areas where you've struggled, developmental milestones that you reached in each position, and learning outcomes that you made in each position as well. So typical interview questions are going to still apply. You're going to have behavioural type questions and competency-based interview questions. Competencies will usually be outlined on the job spec, which is provided through to you as well. And behavioural type interviews, you know, everybody's probably familiar very much with the structured approach in terms of STAR. You know, you outline very specifically the situation, the task, the action, and the result. Interviews are all about getting across your suitability for the role. So this is really your time to shine in terms of showing how your past experience can relate to the present position, and how you are the candidate that is going to be the preferred candidate for the position. You know, that you've got the skills and experience necessary to do the job. So it's not about what you have, but it's about what you have and how you can apply it to the role at hand. Emma, what would you think there? Or?
Yeah, the only other thing I would say is that online interviews can create more awkward silences than you would have in a face-to-face setting. Just sometimes because there isn't that easy rapport, that there may be blank time. So be conscious of that, and try not to nervously fill it with chitter chatter. Also, make sure that you look at your webcam rather than at the screen. That will come across as eye contact. So if you're looking directly at the webcam, the people who are looking at you will feel like you're trying to make eye contact. It's a slight psychological trick, but it has worked plenty of times for us with candidates who were successful in the past.
Yeah, just a tip on that point, even when just we were doing it ourselves, is to take a post-it and actually put it right beside the webcam on your device. So it actually makes you more aware of where it is and what to focus in on. And next of all, we're going to just have a quick look on personality and how to bring this across with Emma.
Yeah, I think there is a fine line, like in both face-to-face and online interviews, about bringing your personality across. But sometimes what works in person for people, especially people who are very charismatic and enjoy a good joke, whatever, sometimes that falls flat online. So don't be afraid to, be quite reserved and giving your interview questions. A way to be reserved and answering interview questions without completely losing your personality is to incorporate your personality into the interview questions, rather than just telling jokes or trying to become, the funny person on the screen. So, when asked a question in interview about something like your leadership skills or past experiences, provide a real life anecdote or story or example of that skill. That will talk about who you as a person are in your role, but also will give across some personality traits, as well. Then towards the end of the interview, most interviewers will ask if you have any questions or if there's anything you wanted to add or whatever. At that point, absolutely you have an opportunity to ask any questions relating to personal interests or hobbies or things like that might be relevant. So, for example, one of the interviews we had done recently, one of the doctors did the interview, and at the end they asked him, did he have any questions? And he said, look, the hospital looks great. I'm very interested. What I'd like to know is how far from the coast is it? I'm a keen surfer. And the interviewer and the candidate were able to engage then about surfing and created a really good rapport. It's a very neutral topic, but it did create a good rapport between them. I think in general, in an online interview, you can bring in parts of your personality through examples and scenarios. Like if you're asked about, completing a project. You know, it's as relevant to talk about running a marathon as it is to talk about finishing a filing project at work, you know. So that would be my advice. You know, don't get too personal, but try and bring yourself into the interview as much as you can. Guys, anything I missed?
No, I'd say you covered off pretty much everything, Emma. I would say probably more the personality pieces would come in maybe after some of the formal interview questions, and that might be a chance or a time when people get to kind of loosen up a little bit and maybe try and have a normal conversation about some things as well. So
no, I think that was perfect. And more importantly, we have to cover what happens when something goes wrong.
yeah.
Aisling.
So I guess if you were, my perspective on this is, if you were preparing to attend for a normal face-to-face interview, what you would normally do is, you know, your recruiter would have sent you out the information in terms of the details of where they were and where the interview was going to actually happen. You probably would look it up on Google Maps, get an idea of the best route, how long is it going to take me to drive there. So that's your normal interview preparation. But in terms of, I guess, you know, your preparation for an online interview is, we all need to look at the situations and the scenarios that can arrive to prepare for when things go wrong. Look, we've all seen them floating around on LinkedIn and social platform medias in terms of, you know, the cat jumping on the keyboard, the 2-year-old coming into the room crying, looking for mum, or, you know, your kids are outside and they're in the kitchen, like mine were this morning, having a Barney about like which sort of learning platform they were going to use. So, you know, you need to prepare. These are the things that you need. These are risks. These are things that can go wrong, and you need to prepare for them as well. So technology failures do happen. It's part and parcel course. So what you need to do is be a little bit like Finding Dory and just keep swimming, guys. You know, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, pretend everything is normal, carry on as best you can, and just get it back on track. Don't let it knock you out. Everybody's human at the end of the day. And look, interviewers are not out to catch you. They're out to try and get the best out of you as well. So it's just a little blip, and you just need to get back on the bike.
Yeah, I'd say as well as that, don't be afraid to tell them that there's a problem. Like if you can't hear them or you can't hear the question, don't be afraid to ask them to repeat it or whatever. Like a lot of these online technology platforms, there are failures and blips and freezes. Yeah. So people are expecting that. They're not going to judge you if you ask them to repeat a question 2 or 3 times. Just be polite, use your best language, and whatever you do, don't curse at the screen no matter what's going on. Yeah.
Another thing is that I'd say that like the majority of the platforms that are used, like they have that backup option of chat. So if you have a video failure or an audio failure, like use the chat command, have a backup. Like I would see that like a lot of my candidates would be coming from, say, like the Middle East and trying to relocate back to Ireland and things like that, where they have to use a VPN. Like that can crash at any given time. Like, you know, so make sure that they have the phone number there and that they have the backup idea so they can go and either call over a cell or a landline if, say, any of these platforms don't work, you know.
And just remember, everybody's in the same position. You know, everybody's working from home, your interviewees, the people they're going to be interviewing you, everybody's in the same position. They're also planning for the same possibilities of things going wrong. So, you know, we're all kind of in this together at the moment. So
absolutely. And the technology failure, it can easily happen on their side as yours, you know, and like that's the truth of it. Not everybody has high-speed broadband, you know. Quite a lot of people are still nearly
not in Cavan.
There's hotspotting, there's God knows what going on at the minute to try and get decent signals, you know. So just the whole thing is to be polite and to be patient and just keep going.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. That's perfect. And then we're just moving up to the final part of it here now with the post-interview section.
Yeah. So I think post-interview, you you really should allow the person who's hosting the interview, the interviewer, to finish the interview. So they should wrap it up in terms of saying, okay, thanks for your time and we'll be in touch. Or they might say, okay, that's the end and you will be organizing second round interviews and we'll be in touch or whatever, but allow them to finish it. You know, be patient and pause. If they're still writing notes or whatever, don't just hang up or say bye or whatever. The etiquette is that the interviewer should terminate the video. The other thing is to make sure you allocate plenty of time. It's a regular occurrence in healthcare interviews that they struggle to establish a connection with one person. So then they go on and do multiple other interviews and then come back to you maybe even an hour or two later. So allocate yourself plenty of time. Be flexible. And if it needs to be rescheduled, be okay with that and be prepared that that might happen. Most organizations are hiring because they're busy and because they're a little bit understaffed. So if your interviewer can't make that particular interview time or whatever, be okay with that. You know, have a schedule that's flexible to cope with that. I think that the final thing to say always in an interview is to thank everyone for their time. And for the opportunity. So a simple thank you for your time and thank you for the opportunity. You know, good manners always goes down well at the end of an interview. Anything else, guys?
Yeah, I would say just in terms of, you know, post-interview etiquette as well is, again, in a normal interview, you should have some pre-prepared intelligent questions relevant to the company and the role. You know, sometimes you can finish up an interview with something very generic like, okay, thank you, what's the next steps? But, you know, this is your time also to show that you're genuinely aware of what the company's doing, that you're genuinely interested in them. You can ask them questions like, you know, something along the lines of, see, like, you know, 6 months ago you expanded into the European markets. How did you find that process or procedure, or how is it everything being impacted by, you know, the recent coronavirus, or something intelligent and smart and relevant that's going to actually, you know, open up a little bit more of a relaxed conversation with them as well. And sometimes these kind of door handle conversations, kind of like when you're about to kind of walk out the door, it can kind of give the interview panel the best sense sometimes of what you really like and your interest levels as well, you know. So that would be my feedback. I've also had a situation as well where I had an Irish candidate interview online with an Irish person and an Italian person as well. So there was 3 of them. There was also some technology issues. Things went down. And there was also an added barrier in terms of maybe some language issues, as well as some delays in feedback as such as well. And, you know, that's really where the recruiter can come in and we can help you with this process as well. The candidate details some of the issues that they'd had during the online interview to us. They felt that maybe some areas they had missed some of the communication in terms of what they wanted to relay or express. I kind of communicated that back through in detail to the client, and look, they were very appreciative and understood the situation, and they were very happy to, you know, kind of for the candidate to clarify some information. So that's just another avenue that you can think of if you're in the middle of things and you think that it's not going well or they're not hearing you, there's a communication, the sound issue. You've always got a little bit of a backpedal as well. You can talk with your recruiter and make sure that they get messages through to the client as well on your behalf.
And that is it, I think. Now we're going to open up to some questions. Thank you very much, ladies, for joining me here today. Now let's just have some questions before we wrap up for today. Yeah.
Everybody's been very quiet.
I know.
You're obviously that good.
Okay, so we have a question. Would you recommend having your CV in front of you? Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the only platforms probably where you can't go into a face-to-face interview with your CV sitting in front of you, but you could have I would suggest maybe writing down 3 or 4 bullet points per role, maybe shortening it and putting it on post-its. Like you can surround your laptop with post-its, and they're little prompts and reminders if you do get stuck in the middle of a conversation, that you can be prompted. And that is an advantage in terms of online versus face-to-face.
Yeah, controversially, I would say probably not. But I suppose more in the healthcare sector, I would expect a candidate to be able to talk through their experience fluidly before they would do an online interview. If you need it as a visual prop, like stand it up beside your saying stand it up beside your webcam or whatever if you need it as a visual prop. But really, the most basic question that nearly every candidate is asked is talk us through your CV or tell us about yourself. And you should be able to start with, I graduated in 1999. My first role was with XYZ Hospital. I gained experience there in X and Y, and I moved on in 2004 to XY Hospital. You should be able to have that conversation without a visual prompt. And that's a question to ask yourself. Am I ready for interview? Can I talk someone through my background and experience without having to look at a visual prompt? So my thing would be ideally not, but if you need it, prop it up on your screen.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
So we just had another question there, Miriam. Do you want to take that one? Or?
So how many interviewers are typically on an online interview? It's normally between like 2 to 5 max is what I've seen. Like, and even to be fair, like any of the interviews that have been conducted with Skype with me have even been just one-on-one. It depends on the company and say the level of seniority that the position is for. And like that's across the board within the market. Like you wouldn't have panels as big as you'd see like normally in face-to-face interviews, and it's largely because like it'll just draw down on the technology as well. Like a good few of these service providers, they can record it anyway, so like it could go out the other end that other people will be able to sit down and have a look through the interview, be it on the HR teams or else within the management teams themselves. And I think, to be fair, if you had 4 or 5 people trying to ask you questions, like it's very hard, to make sure that they're not talking on top of each other and that you answer everybody, in the right light. There's another question there. So, do you think it's a good idea to have the job spec at the company website open on the screen in front of you?
No.
No.
I'd have to say no. I mean, if you were going into a face-to-face interview, you should totally understand the job spec in detail. Having the company website, again, you should have researched that prior to any interview, and it's only going to be a distraction in there. You do not want to have any additional distractions. So I'd say that's a bit of a cheat. That's a no-no.
Yeah, and like I think, to be fair, you should only have one screen in front of you. I know some people from home would have, say, 2 screens open at any given time, but for this, just have the one screen with the interview open, and that's it. Like minimize your distractions, as we were saying earlier. If you had if you want prompts about the spec or prompts about the website, have them on post-its, but don't, because it'll turn out that you'll turn your head and you're reading all of this information, and they'll know well because they can see your face, so I definitely wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I think it's back to the earlier advice about preparing, prepare. Read the company website, read the job spec, use it to prepare questions you might ask at the end, but don't use it as a guide to how you're going to answer questions when you're midway through. Use the job spec well in advance to prepare yourself. If the job spec, like Aisling mentioned earlier, has competencies on it, be prepared that they're going to ask competency-based or could ask a competency-based question around that, but don't have it there. No. No. Look at your webcam and at nothing else.
Absolutely. Let's just see now. Anyone else? Okay. Is there questions unanswered in Ask's question?
So I'll take the first one. So somebody's asked the questions in terms of their mother language is not English. It is important to have a native English accent during interviews. How many times can I ask the interviewer to repeat a question? So again, that would depend on the type of role that you're applying for or where you are applying for the position. Usually if you've been sent through from a recruiter, we will have given the client maybe some indication of our assessment of the level of English as such. But it's not only about your command of the English, but it's also the etiquette around communication and how you can communicate effectively during an interview as well. So it's role dependent, I would say, to answer that question, and location dependent. Emma, you can probably have some advice there.
Sure. I would say if English isn't your first language, that my best advice to you would be to do an English language test that proves your fluency, like an IELTS or OET exam. Then you have certified proof on your CV of what your level of English is like. I do often find that when people are doing online interviews, if English isn't their first language, that when they ask an interviewer to repeat a question, sometimes the interviewer thinks it's English language is the problem. So if you're having a difficulty understanding a question, state clearly, I'm sorry, the video connection just broke up there for a moment. Would you mind repeating the question? That reminds them that your English is perfect. The problem is the video rather than you. But always, I would say, even if it takes 5 attempts to understand what the question is, it's better to understand the question and answer the question that was asked than to pretend you understood it and just start rambling about something. So there's never too many times to ask someone to repeat a question.
Some of the times what we would do as well in terms of where English is not a first language and you're going to be asked technical questions in terms of engineering or manufacturing positions, from the CV that you have the relevant experience for the position. But what we would advise candidates to do is to write out possible question and answer scenarios so they can communicate effectively and very well in the English language in terms of what they've done. Sometimes some of the technical language is difficult to get across in terms of, maybe automation roles or maintenance roles. Have the lingo that's relevant to the position as well and be able to communicate that effectively. You might be very good conversationally with English, but if you start drilling down into technical pieces, you can fall down.
Another thing that I'd say there is, like, if you're a non-native speaker, is to first of all pick the section of English that is actually going to suit the interview itself. So say, for example, if it's the Irish market, if you come out with kind of like terms that aren't even used within the Irish market, then you're going to kind of catch yourself up, and then the interviewer is going to be on a completely different wavelength as well. And another thing is, like, tone of voice is very, very important. Like, if you're a non-native speaker, you have to get used to speaking with people who speak English on a regular basis. So, like, get the value add from your recruiter, have regular conversations with them, learn how to just speak English softly, and so that, you are portraying yourself in the best light, and the whole thing is you have to be polite. Like, it doesn't make a difference where you really come from or, what your level of English is, that you have to be polite the whole way through. And definitely to say, like, if things go wrong, know what to say, as in, I can't hear you, sorry, excuse me, or whatever, and to have those kind of responses as well, because they mightn't come up on, say, like, your typical like interview prep website or anything like that. It's only through actually talking to a recruiter that they will tell you, how do you deal with such and such a situation? So it's really practice, and it's really just communication all the way, like, and just to know exactly what the market is, what the language is, and to just keep going. That's it.
I think we had another question. What would you wear to a video interview? Would it be the same as face-to-face? I had a video interview recently and the interviewers were casually dressed. Any tips or advice? So I think that probably varies by market, but my advice would be that it doesn't matter if the interviewer is in the nip, it's still not okay for you to be casual or you to be underdressed. Wear something neutral and smart. Now, if you're like my candidates, which are mostly healthcare professionals, it's okay to be in a uniform or scrubs or something that's relevant to the role because you may be at work doing the interview. And I think that's okay for a lot of professionals. But if you're trying to decide what you would actually wear in your home office to do an online interview, dress smart, dress like you would for a face-to-face interview. And as I said before, check it. Like you'll see all three of us are wearing quite dark, neutral clothes. It doesn't distract from what we're saying. And that's my advice.
I think you have to wear something that suits your personality. I worked with a candidate recently, and she had been out of work in her profession for 2 years due to personal reasons, and she was returning to work. But she was of the mentality that, you know, her profession was very suit orientated. She had a wardrobe full of suits that she always wore. And that was her question around it as well. And I just kind of talked to her and said, well, look, the number one thing is that you need to feel comfortable in the clothes that you're wearing, and it probably has moved a little bit more away from the formal, for a lot of roles, from the formal suit type wearing interviews into something business smart and casual. And look, you know, I spoke with her about it. She went through the interview. She wore something, you know, business smart, and she said on a comfort level, so that was the most comfortable she'd ever felt going through an interview. So you don't want to sit there and feel like you're stiff. You know, you have to be able to move and feel yourself at the end of the day as well, but definitely business smart there as well. So we have another question in here. If you see a job offer post that matches with your experience, is it a good idea to get in touch with the recruiter on LinkedIn? Absolutely. I'd say just that's that one kind of covered off fairly quickly.
It's our job. Come and talk to us, please.
Yeah, come and talk to us. And look, you know, even though don't be kind of dismayed if we don't get back to you for a little bit of time. It's the normal run of business. Recruiters are running multiple roles as well, so we will try and get back to you as quick as possible as well. Most of our contact details are on LinkedIn, our contact numbers. You can contact us as well. So we'll get back to you.
There's another question there from Jeff. What tips would you have for someone who's looking to move to another related industry versus someone looking to move up within their industry?
I would say, Jeff, thank you for your question. I think that's probably something we're going to cover off in a separate webinar. Today, we're just trying to keep the focus on online interviews. So if you want to reach out to us after the webinar through LinkedIn, Jeff, you're more than welcome, and we'll help you, because I think that kind of falls in under a separate area. Is that okay?
I think online interviews are pretty much standard, regardless of whether you're moving to another industry or whether you're moving up. You know, they don't vary versus, you know, versus face-to-face. Online video interviewing would be the same regardless, I think, you know. So, but moving industries is probably a topic for another day.
Yeah, definitely.
And like, the truth of the matter is, right now we're going through a time that has never been seen before, that everything is going to change. Like, where it would have been standard to have your face-to-face, it's going to have to be online for the foreseeable future, you know. And the whole thing is to get the practice in, to be patient, you know, communicate with your recruiter, communicate with colleagues, you know. Everyone has that little bit more time to spend on it. Make sure you're going to give it your best shot, you know, because you might as well. Why not? Yeah.
I have another question there. I'm a nurse, recently did an interview to a position in an Irish hospital. I failed the interview, but I didn't hear from the recruitment agency about my weakness points to fix them. What are your suggestions? Well, I suppose I'm a healthcare recruiter, so I'll probably take that one first. What I would say is that in the healthcare industry, very often we don't get feedback. We get a pass-fail response in terms of people at interview. So it can be very difficult as a recruiter to give you specific advice on where you went wrong or how you did. What I would say, my best advice to anyone out there who's a nurse or a doctor or any professional who's failed an interview, straight after your interview, before you know whether you've passed or failed it, write a really comprehensive email to your recruitment consultant about everything that happened in your interview. Every question you were asked, every response you gave, and that will help us to advise where you did go wrong on that day. Maybe you were asked a competency-based question and you misunderstood what that competency was. Maybe you were asked a clinical scenario where to you it sounded like the person was having a heart attack, but in reality it was indigestion, you know. So if you give us a comprehensive feedback with as much detail as possible, then we will try our best. But the reality on the ground is that hospitals and healthcare professionals who are doing interviews, they don't have the time in their day even to do interviews, let alone to give feedback on the interviews they've had to do because they're short-staffed. Again, they're only hiring because they're already short-staffed. It's frustrating as a candidate because you want to get better. If you do link in with a good recruitment consultant, they'll probably be able to give you advice and tips on where you might have gone wrong. And sometimes I think if you sit back and think about your own performance, you might identify a few areas yourself where you feel you went wrong, discuss them with your recruiter, and then maybe you can work on how you would improve them for the next interview you get. The good news is that you were shortlisted for an interview. So chances are there's plenty more interviews out there for you. Just make sure you're registered with a really good agency. Like us.
And I think we have another question hiding here now. Is it a good idea to have pen and paper? I would say yes, but I wouldn't get fixated on it. Like I'd nearly say the pen and paper stage would be done beforehand, like as we were going through already, like to have your post-it notes prepared. But it would only be if it was like, say, something where you had to, they're asking you to do calculations. Like I've had examples, all right, of say design engineers and even say CAD technicians, where they would actually bring them on, like, and basically share a screen with them and ask them to analyze, say, drawings and things like that. In that situation, yes, it's good to have a bit of pen and paper or even a calculator if it's relevant to your sector. But on average, if you're a doctor or if you're working in a commercial setting or you're working in IT, pen and paper is not going to be what you're going to need, to be fair. You're just going to need to know your CV, and you're going to need to know the job, and you're going to need to know the actual client that you're interviewing for. And then, to keep the whole thing relevant as well, don't go off on tangents, just to keep it to the point and just keep it right would be the best thing there.
Yeah, I agree completely, Miriam. I'm an awful fidgeter. I actually have to sit on my hands. If I had a pen to click or paper to move, I'd be doing it. Another thing actually that springs to mind when you talk about that is that a lot of times when I'm on video chats with people, if I am moving paper, the microphone picks it up instead of my voice. So my advice to any of you fellow fidgeters out there is to not have anything anywhere near you. Sit on your hands and don't touch anything because it'll mess up your voice.
And like even touching your face, like that can come across, like if you're the type of person you're here like this in the interview, you won't come across well at all. Like, And then another thing is, like, they say somewhere between Mona Lisa and the Cheshire Cat, do not smile the whole way through, because that won't look right either. It's just to keep that right balance, But
and I think that brings us to what's on for next week's webinar.
So next week, we are actually going to be going through temping vacancies on next Wednesday, and then followed by a management with our general manager, Colin Donnery, with Kevin Green, and also with Sarah, who is the positive economist. And thank you all for coming here today, folks. And this is also recorded for anyone who missed it. And we're looking forward to seeing you all again. And if anyone feels like reaching out, all of our LinkedIn details are in the PowerPoint, which has been shared with you all as well. And just pop us a message and say hi.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.